Hey everybody, Matt, IronTrap Garage. We are doing our IronTrap podcast interview, however you're looking or listening to this. We're here. We're with Jeff Yeagle, East Coast Woodies. Jeff is a wood fanatic. I guess that's your...
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
That's your offense. So we were going through our list. We first started doing this of people that, like, obviously we have people that have big collections of speed equipment and this and that. But then we were trying to go kind of outside a little bit. That's still, an obsession, if you will, or a passion. And I mean, yours is obviously.
Sure. I mean, I'm into antique station wagons, Woodie wagons, right? So anything that's really made out of wood for antique vehicles.
Right.
And really focus more on Fords, 29 to 51, 52, but I don't discriminate. I've had Oldsmobiles. I've done work on Buicks and early Chevys and all that stuff.
Right. So what's your give us a background first before we get involved on, obviously where you're located, how people can get in touch with you before we get real far into this, and when did you start on the...
Sure. So I do have a website, eastcoastwoodies.com, and I'm local to you guys. I'm here in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania. When did I get started? So when I was a kid, I was about 11, right? My parents would take us to all these car events, and I came across a 29 Model A wagon. It's just the coolest thing. I had never encountered one before. I think that was like the first step. Later on in life, after college, I went to Hershey for like one of the first times by myself, and there was a Ford Sportsman, which, as you guys know, is kind of like my thing, right?
Yep.
Those cars in particular, and I think I like it so much, those cars so much, because number one, they're wood, right? The Sportsman's a convertible, and then it's super low production, and you like unique stuff.
Yep.
Mike is after unique stuff. We're all after that unique thing. Ford Sportsmans, by definition, are all those things, but furthermore, especially the early Ford wagons, they're all individually serial numbered.
Oh.
So yeah, so that's pretty cool. So they have a body number that's separate from the VIN that tells you more or less like the day it was produced, and you can tell a lot of things about it. So
Wow.
That's pretty cool.
So the first time you saw that Woody at a show when you were younger, was it just like almost equivalent to seeing a spaceship or something? You're like, how is this car wood? Or,
Well, I guess.
You were just intrigued.
I was just intrigued. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah. And then, my profession, having taught now for a bunch of years at all different levels, I'm always enamored by the process, right? How it happens. And so I think it was more, it is for me, it's more that. It's like, how do I take this part that Ford engineered in 1938, 39, whenever, and then how do I make that today with modern technology, right? Or how do I do it better, or even just as good as they did it back then?
Just maybe a little quicker than...
Well, it's not always quicker. I wish.
You would think it would be, but not always.
No.
But yeah, I mean, some of the parts are so intricate. It's like I can't imagine just the process to figure out how to make or reproduce it.
Exactly.
It's half the secret. So it's like, I feel like with metal cars, it's a lot more straightforward for producing or putting it together. You can fudge it with a lap weld or something and make it work.
Right. You can hide the sins of your mistakes, maybe with a little Bondo, and make it happen. But with a Woodie wagon, you just can't do that. And probably the layperson doesn't know maybe when something's right or wrong. But I've spent so much time studying these early wagons that I can walk up to something and say, well, that's not how it's supposed to be.
Right.
Which is really, I think that's the IronTrap right here, the
that's
wood trap. That's the problem. I know the way it's kind of supposed to be, and it bothers me when something's not right on my own car, and there's lots of things wrong on my own cars, but yeah.
So we call it the switch. It's the thing that kind of made you go from just a casual enthusiast to kind of obsessed or super passionate about your focus. So for you, obviously, Woodie wagons. What was there a switch or switches that made you kind of go all in, so to speak?
Right. So, I mean, obviously, encountering those cars in my past, the Model A wagon, coming across that Sportsman at Hershey all those years ago, I somehow, I don't really know how this happened, but I was included in a group email, and a lot of the people on that email were professional woodworkers who had restored wagons for years. A couple of these guys have now passed on. Doug Carr being one of them, the guy that I looked up to. I had a chance to meet him a couple times.
Cool.
So anyway, we would get emails with questions about how we would do things, and I responded, and lo and behold, I was included in the book, right?
Oh, wow.
As a contributor, which is kind of cool. Another guy that was included was a fellow, Tom Klein here from Pennsylvania. And Tom passed away about a year and a half, 2 years ago now. And this summer, I was able to buy basically the patterns from his business. So
Oh, wow.
that gave me the opportunity now to do wagon parts from 29 to 51. So, I've got a library of patterns that I can work from. I think that might be the switch.
Wow.
Right.
Okay. So that was a little a little later on, but
And there were, I guess the important thing to say is I think it took a little while because I was involved in the hobby for a long time as a hobbyist. I was interested in these cars for a long time. And, shoot, I've taken a picture of every wagon I've ever encountered.
Wow.
So I don't know that it was all in one shot.
right,
Maybe.
but slowly built up for you.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, and then look at what we've accomplished
Yeah.
here.
It's probably more of your take on all in, because a lot of we're really crazy about this stuff. So probably a more casual person probably would have thought 30 years ago you were all in because you were really into it. Like making parts from scratch is pretty.
Not everybody does that?
No,
Oh, okay.
So that's what I mean. Same way with me. I'm like, I'm not that bad.
Right.
And then it's like and then you look at a guy who has one car in his garage and he just takes it to cruise-ins. You're like, oh, okay, yeah, we're a little different.
Yeah, okay. All right. Well, then, yeah, I've been all in for a while.
Quite a while. Yeah, that's funny. So we call it the key items in your collection. So for you, it's probably a nice mix of cars, parts, and also machines in your case.
Yeah.
So like for cars, yourself, what is there a car that you still have or had that's like, or have that's kind of like key to you?
Yeah, so my 40 wagon, that's pretty key. That was, that's the recycled 40 Ford Woodie. Mm-hmm. That car has all used wood on it that came from another restoration. I put that car together, like everything on the car, and that's my car. And what I mean by that, kind of like your Sweetheart Roadster,
Yep.
nobody's ever going to be able to say that they own it because, excuse me, you started with that
Yes,
car, right?
yep.
So I think my 40 wagon, that's mine. Like somebody else might own it someday, but
It'll always be your
it's
car.
probably going to be, yeah.
And that's old cars and old hot rods forever. I mean, look at cars that were built in the 40s. We still call it by the original builder's name,
Yeah.
So I get it. Yeah.
I think that's pretty key. The 32 wagon that I just got in the spring, that was started by another shop teacher out of state, and that's pretty cool because of who had it and the story behind it. The piece of equipment behind me is CNC router, computer controlled router. That's pretty key because it helps me build a lot of parts.
Right.
But it's kind of useless unless you know the process that I've developed to actually model parts in 3D and then generate tool paths to actually cut parts out.
Oh, wow.
And then really my library of parts and literally it's not at this facility, but I've got a place where I've got it's just sticks of wood, and it looks like some of these places you and Mike go into where it's piles and piles of Buick parts or Ford parts or whatever, and it's
all your patterns.
Literally just sticks of wood. And probably to anybody else it's firewood, but
Yeah.
to me it's
That's
priceless.
That's all your patterns that you have.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for parts, it's actually the patterns that are probably the most key for you.
Yeah, and I'm always looking to find better stuff because shoot, as soon as you put the car on the road, it's going to start to deteriorate a little bit.
Right.
Yeah, the patterns are pretty damn important to me.
Is there such a thing as NOS Woody part, like Woody parts?
As a matter of fact, they are. There are some NOS Woody parts.
Let me take you to my NOS Woody department.
Yeah, so several years ago, a friend of ours in Minnesota helped get me into a collection, and in that collection were a couple pieces of new Ford wood.
Wow.
And I'm not talking like a little stick. So I have a complete roof rail for a 37 Ford wagon it is brand new.
That's crazy.
It is nuts. And in my wildest dreams, did I ever think I'd own something like that? No.
I never would have thought they would have made, because cars were kind of built one off. It's surprised they made spares.
You would think that, but I think Fords were standardized to the point where, and without giving away too many secrets, because I saw it and how it was sent to quote unquote a dealer, it completely changed how I thought these parts were made.
Okay.
Up until that point, I was like, oh, they definitely did it this way. And as soon as I went, no way, I grabbed this part in my hand, I went, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense. Like everything I thought they did, that's not what they did.
Oh, interesting.
So that's probably the most important piece I've ever found in my life, because
Wow.
it completely changed, like, again, how I thought they did things.
So not only for rarity, but also the knowledge.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
rarity. It's just a piece of firewood. I mean, and the reality is, in the rest of the world, how many people would want that stick of wood?
Yeah.
Not too many.
Right.
But it explained to me how parts are made. Now, in the GM cars and some of the like independent body makers, you're right. I mean, there's a lot of variations. The Oldsmobile Woody that I had, there were things, I shouldn't say this, there's things on the left side that didn't match the right side.
Right.
You didn't know that going down the road, and the layperson looking at it wouldn't have any clue.
Yeah, right.
But the bodybuilder just wasn't on point, as they say, right?
Right.
So
That's interesting. So this is always a fun one. The one that got away, is there, whether it's car or part or whatever, if you have a few things, that's good. But is there something in this hobby that got away from you that you either regret selling or you had a chance to buy and just couldn't?
So this actually still hurts. Right? This actually hurts a lot.
Oh,
Most of them usually do.
Oh my gosh. So say like 10 years ago, I really had no business doing this, but I had this idea, well, I'll post on all these internet forums a want ad, right? And it was incredibly well written. I think it said, wanted Ford Sportsman stuff. I mean, that's
very specific.
right.
Yeah.
It was just that. And, we don't do anything unless we do it to excess, right? So I put it everywhere. I mean, everywhere.
Every forum, yep.
So, and this was during a time when people could respond to your want ads,
Yeah.
like right on the want ad, right? So, okay. So I post all these things. Months go by, probably years go by, it doesn't matter. And the Antique Automobile Club message board sends me an email and it says, hey, by the way, we're updating the forum software. You're going to need to do like these 10 things to like renew your account because you've been inactive, and on and on and on. I'm like, okay, whatever. So I think I do those things, and then there's a link that says these are your old posts if you want to look at them. Well, darn it if somebody didn't respond to that ad. And the worst part was, my wanted Ford Sportsman, the response was something like, and I'll change the guy's name. Hi, this is Mike Ham. My phone number is, I restored 6 of those cars.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah. I've got tooling. I've got machinery. I've got all the material you would need. And I'm in this town, in this place, without giving it away. Okay? So, being the cool guy I am, I'm like, no problem. I'll just ring them up right now. I'll be there tomorrow, because this place is like 6 hours away from here.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah. So I call him up, hey, this is Jeff. Saw your response to my ad. Oh yeah, man, I wish I could help you out, but I sold that stuff. Yeah, because who else in the world would be looking for this but me? But apparently there was somebody. I'm like, so I did manage to talk to him a little bit and get some information out of him. And I got the number that he got, and I was like, okay, I probably couldn't have swung that at that particular point. Mm-hmm. And I got the guy's name, and I said, just out of curiosity, what's he doing with all this stuff? Well, he's going to come up here it was in Canada. He's going to come up to Canada. He's going to get it. He's going to move it, all this stuff, in two 53-foot tractor trailer loads.
That much, wow.
Yeah. To Mexico, because this fella had some connection with a shop in Mexico. So the problem with this, not necessarily is that all that happened, but that now all this stuff is now moved probably past our houses as it traveled.
No.
Yeah, I think they waved at me as they went
like,
by, right?
Sucker.
And now it's in Mexico, and I have stayed in contact with the folks, with all of those folks. Long story short, one of the cars that was sort of kind of part of that package now belongs to a good friend of mine in Washington State. And I've supplied him a few pieces. So I guess it's kind of okay. And now I have more patterns than I need for those cars.
Right. So. But that was still like the ultimate score for you would have been.
Oh, it burnt so bad because, okay, I could have come up with the money. I could have done it. I could have driven to Canada. It would have been easy. The 50-foot trailer loads would have been a problem, but
hey, you could sort it out.
I'd have called somebody.
We always sort it out. That's a good problem.
That was hard. That was hard. Otherwise, everything else I've ever lost or gotten rid of or missed. Hell, I missed an auction yesterday. It's okay.
Yeah.
That one burns though.
Yeah,
right?
I bet.
That one burns.
So how many? This is a specific one, I guess, for you. Can you name all the different Woodies that you've had or put on the road or driven? Like, I mean, you've had.
Well, like right now, I've got two 29s, but I've actually had about 5 29 wagons over the years in parts and pieces, right? Mm-hmm. I have the 32. I have a 36 it's kind of like, that's actually a great project. It's been together and apart like 6 or 7 times. I built a roof for it once. A company, a business called me and said, hey, we need a roof. So I sold them the roof and made another roof.
Of course.
The same thing with one of the doors. I think I made a door twice. The 40 Ford. I actually have a 39 Ford wagon in parts.
Oh, wow.
The Sportsman. And I actually have 2 Sportsman project cars. And then I've had 2 or 3 51s.
Oh, okay.
Most of which were pretty rough.
Okay. And those ones aren't, Mike and I were talking about when we first talking. Is 51, they weren't like what you would think of as a normal Woody, so to speak, or they still have a lot? Is it like more like veneer?
Well, veneer is not really the right word. It's just not structural. So there's a metal behind it. And I would actually love to find one right now that doesn't have any wood on it that is not rusty, which is the real problem with the shoe boxes. Because I think I know I have 2 or 3 sets of pattern wood for that.
Wow.
And I think I have a whole set of like repo wood all ready to go. So anybody wants to sell me their shoebox wagon.
So like 48 was the last year where it was actually structural?
Yeah, 48 wagons are the last structural
for
wood.
Ford.
For Ford. Chevy, there's some 49 Chevys that have what you would call structural wood. Oldsmobile, same way, but not very many. And then Mopar, it's kind of hard to explain, but like I have parts for a 49 DeSoto right now that are, the roof's steel, but the wood sort of holds the roof up. Just kind of weird, yeah. So your initial question was like cars that I've worked on. In addition to the wagons, I've done quite a few early cars that are wood framed.
Oh, okay.
And then the metal stapled on the outside. A good friend Rich just had a 36 Buick here that we did the wood on that.
No.
I did a long time ago. I did a early Mercedes-Benz, like 52 from the outside, this thing looks like it's just a steel body, but underneath,
Mostly wood.
it's all ash, and that particular car was rough. That was a
Wow.
mess.
That's cool.
And yeah, probably some others I'm forgetting too.
But I guess since so many antique cars were wood framed up until, everybody was pretty much 90% wood framed.
yeah, the Fords would be the exception, really.
Yeah.
Well, even your 3-window, it's got some wood in the B pillar.
Oh yeah, huge pieces of
pillar.
wood in the B pillar and over the doors. And
Yep.
so yeah, the whole cabin area is framed out with structural wood, I would say.
Right.
Yeah.
Early Chevys are like that too, and it's hard to say this because I love Chevys, but the process they used was kind of crummy because they literally built the wood frame and then they nailed with like little tiny tacks the material to the wood and the metal to the wood, and that's bad. That's just not a good scene.
It gets moisture in the hole and around the nail.
Well, and then when it deteriorates, like the car kind of falls down. And
Yeah.
you guys have come across that in the
Oh,
field
yeah.
when you go out on picks. I mean, you see that all the time. So to find an early Chevy,
That's always a question when somebody gives you a call about an early GM car like that. You're like, you don't ask how's the rust. You go, is there any wood left?
yeah, and then they say things like, well, it's not bad, which translates to it's really, really bad.
It's
I
bad.
think every Chevy project I've ever seen for sale, the car is just like toppled
Yeah.
in on itself because the wood's just gone.
Yeah, and from this job, business, hobby, whatever the heck I'm doing here, I get to go a lot of places. One of the coolest things I've ever encountered, a guy, I think he was in Maryland, walked in his shop. He had an early Chevy, and he had the wooden frame like assembled up on a shelf.
Oh,
so they
cool.
had taken the wood out, which made me cry a little bit, and they'd steeled out the car to make it a little more rigid,
Yeah.
I guess. But he kept the frame, and man, I would love to have that. 'Cause
That's
it's
cool.
so freaking cool, just the skeleton of the car.
Yeah. I've seen some high-end restoration stuff on, Amelia Island type stuff where they had that, where the frame's all put together and
Yeah.
haven't started to skin it
Skin it
yet.
yet.
Just looks wild to
Yeah.
see all of that kind of together. But
Yeah.
I guess you sort of need to do that.
Yeah, you do. Yeah,
you got to
you do.
really fit all the wood before you can skin it.
Exactly, and it's people think that's simple, that's easy. I'm going to attack it with a power plane and everything's going to be great. And it might be, but it
Wow.
might not.
So did you started on obviously metal cars, didn't you? What's your background in, because I already know the answer to this, but you worked at a shop in your younger days, and so some of that background would be interesting, I think.
Sure. So you're going to probably interview our friend Steve Kilmer at some point, 'cause he's got a really cool collection too, and I won't give away what that is, but Steve tells a really great story about how he worked for Grumpy Jenkins and how he had no business in that, right? So I was in college. I showed up at the door of Posey's Rods and Customs in Hummelstown, PA, one fall afternoon, whatever, and hey, give me a tour of this place. Let me check it out. And they did. And before we left, I said to the office manager, hey, I'm going to school. It's Millersville University, and would you guys ever consider hiring a guy like me for the summer? And he's like, well, maybe. And long story short, I ended up working there the next summer.
Right.
And it was what's most important here, or pertinent to our conversation, is that that was the year that Posey was working on the Extremliner, which is his goofy, sorry Ken, Woodie Wagon.
Right.
Right. And, I was there while they were doing stuff to it, and I got to, hold something while one of the guys welded, and I got to clean up after them, and I got to
Right.
do a lot of body work on other cars and learned a lot about the process that they use, and I think that was pretty key to help me later on to kind of figure out how to run my gig, right?
Oh, okay, yeah. Saw the process of putting cars together and custom cars.
Yeah, and like how they interacted with customers and how they updated customers,
okay.
how they kept on top of keeping projects on schedule.
Right.
That's because that's a real challenge. I mean, when you work for somebody else, everybody's got their own timeline, and I try my best to accommodate people. But it's like so many of us, it's just me. You know, I don't have a gang of people working for me, and I never intend to.
Right.
And, you know, things like, you know, waiting for glue to dry, you can't make that happen faster. So,
No.
yeah, so I worked there for a while. For a summer, I worked for a chassis builder doing tube chassis work in Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
Oh, cool.
And then I've had a number of different jobs, all related to my teaching job.
Right. Yeah.
And so, you know, I'm closing in on like 27 years in education, and
Oh, that's cool.
probably, you know, eventually leave that and probably do this full
Do
time.
this. Yeah.
At least that's the hope.
Right. But you've learned a lot of patience in that part. In
Yeah.
that career, you've learned the patience side of things.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's it.
That's a way to put it.
That's a great way to put it.
So one thing that's kind of interesting, I've noticed interacting, going to auctions and different things, to see each other around, you could pretty much stand with the most knowledgeable guys at an auction or a flea market because of this Woody stuff so obscure.
Yeah.
And pick stuff. I've seen it before.
Yeah,
Is it? There's no way you have to just. Is it like a lot of things? You just have to work on them to know a lot of it, because it's not like there's a forum that says, "Oh, that's a Woody XYZ."
Right. I remember being at an auction with you years ago, and we're standing over a pile of bumper irons.
Yeah.
And I put my hand up, and you looked at me like, "What the heck are you doing?"
They're all rusty and crap.
Yeah. So I reach down and I pick out two, and I just want these two. And then I probably paid $20 for the pair. And then they sold the whole rest of the pile for like $1.
Yeah.
Probably to you, right?
Maybe. Yeah.
And you looked at me like, "What the heck you did?" I'm like, "I know what these are."
These are Woody Wagon.
Yeah, you know.
Well, now we know the answer whenever Jeff picks something up at a flea market or an auction.
Or text me. Hey, what's up with XYZ?
Yeah,
right.
right.
Like,
Yeah, that's right. Michael put up a picture online and be like, "So that thing over there in the corner,
Yeah.
it's just, don't worry about it. What do you want
not
for that?"
Good. Yeah, it's not good, but what is it?
It's okay.
Yeah.
I just knew to respond. Let me guess. It's wood.
Yeah, right.
But everything, that's what's so crazy, like down to the bumper irons. Like,
Yeah.
The bumper irons are different. The sheet metal is usually pretty, I should say the front sheet metal is usually
Yeah,
pretty much-
wagon fenders are their own animal, and for a long time, especially late 40s wagons, everybody thought, "Oh gosh, you got a Woody Wagon rear fender. That's like something special." Well, as I'm finding out, there's a lot of people that have that stuff squirreled away.
Mm-hmm.
But like, you know, certain parts of the cars are really tough to come by.
Tailgate's got to be like,
Tailgate
rear
stuff is
rear gates.
I mean, a wooden rear gate is tough.
Yeah.
The gate on my 40's in need of repair. In fact, I'm making a new gate this winter.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it's going to be gate central around here. I got a 39 gate that I'm kind of mid progress. Our friend John from Jersey, we got his 48 gate here. That's I'm just trying to match the color on the rest of the car right now, and then I'll do my 40 gate, and I got a Model A gate to do this winter.
Wow.
So they do take a lot of abuse, but I mean the stuff that I find at flea markets and swap meets and stuff, it's all the hard parts like latches and brackets and stuff, and you know, a lot of the brackets are labeled with part numbers for Ford, you know.
But it's not like you can Google it. You
No,
know, like
you
that,
can't really do that.
Anytime I've come across this stuff, it's like you got to have the old parts books.
Or you got to have seen a
Yeah,
lot of
right.
these cars, which is how I've been able to do it. You
Yeah.
know, I've literally walked up to a wagon and I'll take, you know, 100 pictures of different details. A lot of times if you see me at events, I'll take pictures of like where the finger joints are and how wide they are and how many of them are. Because I have a problem, right? That's terrible. I don't like that.
Well, that's correct if you're doing
Yeah.
high-end restoration work. I mean, it needs to be right. So
Yeah.
you know, I understand that
Right.
part of it for sure. But it's just interesting to me that there's so many people wouldn't realize. Not only is it the wood, there's like every bracket that's metal or cast iron or whatever they are. It's so many little pieces to put one of those cars together.
Yeah, and to that end, we, myself and another fellow have been working with a foundry to reproduce a lot of parts.
Oh, cool.
To make it a little bit easier. But even that's a problem too, because like I'll have maybe 10 parts reproduced and I'll accept about 6 of them because I won't be happy with the quality. which ends up costing me more money, and I should be okay with it, but I'm just not. I want it to be right, or as right as it can be. And then to kind of compound that problem, you know, like Model A's have this really crazy bracket on the rear corner of the car that I reproduce. I've learned pretty quickly that I don't drill the holes that mount the bracket to the car, because say you're a customer in Texas that has one of those cars, well, somebody might have worked on your car in 1955 and changed where the holes were. And even though I know that it's right and it's supposed to be in this place to make your life easier, you got to put the hole where it's supposed to be, or where it needs to be for your car.
Yes, that makes sense.
So it's kind of a double-edged sword. You want to make everything perfect, but the reality is you don't know what has happened. And I guess the same thing happens on a metal car. You could think a quarter panel's perfect and it could be full of brass, right?
Right. So, or even like trim holes or something. Somebody might have filled the holes and then re-drilled them, and they're not quite where they're supposed to be. Yeah. Right. So that makes a lot of sense. But yeah, I mean, that seems to be to me would be one of the biggest hurdles, would be finding all those little specialty parts. And is there anybody or many people making whole bodies, or have you considered doing that?
So there were, when I was mentioned a book that I was in 10 years ago, at that point there were about 9 people that you could go to in the world that would reproduce parts or a whole body. Now I'm going to say there's about 6.
Oh, okay.
And you know, have I considered that? I'm waiting for that ask, right?
Yeah, customer.
I'm open to that. Yeah. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, I have so many people that just want 1 or 2 parts that I don't know if I could say yes right now.
Right.
And I'm fortunate. There's a number of cars around this area that have a need, right? So I can go and see a car and, okay, let's do this to solve your problem, kind of thing.
Right.
But yeah, I'd love to build a whole body for somebody.
But you need to even build a body for somebody, you would need those metal parts, a floor pan, a cowl, you know, just to begin their project. Right?
That's true for the most part, although I'm discussing with someone right now building a whole roof, which is its own challenge. And I'm a little hesitant because it's going to be hard to do that and get it where it needs to go, but I'm confident I can make it happen.
Right.
But yeah, as far as like your initial question, a whole car, I would have to have like a frame and, you know, the floor pan and the cowl at least.
Are the floor pans are they different? I guess technically they probably are special.
So like on my 40, the front floor pans are in fact Woody only.
Wow.
As are the rockers.
Oh man.
So like I know you did a video a while ago where you put the floor in your 39 Ford, and I went, man, I wish it would have been that easy.
Just lay the.
That'd have been really cool.
Yeah.
You know, like that's nice. That's really nice, guys. Yeah, it didn't really go that way from my 40. So they were available in repo. I was able to secure a set, but I don't know that they are any longer. So pre-41, all those cars have their own floor pan.
Oh.
Yeah. And then 46 to 8, the floor pan to a certain point is the same as like your dad's daily.
Okay.
And then there's some modifications and changes at the back.
Oh, okay.
And then GM cars, like I just looked at a 40 Chevy a few weeks ago. I think what a lot of bodybuilders did was they took like a 4-door sedan and they just lopped it off because that particular car, most of the floor looked like the 40 Chevy pan that is in my father's car.
Okay.
So yeah, there's a lot of specialties there as well.
That's awesome. Now you taking your Woodies all over the place. I mean, you're not afraid to drive your stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, have you done cross country in
Not in a wagon. My wife and I did cross country in another 40 Ford we have back in 2002. We have a 40 Ford 4-door sedan that's now a convertible sedan. Lopped the top off of it.
Yeah.
Right. We drove that 10,000 miles one summer.
Cool.
pulling a little trailer. My 40 wagon has been driven a lot. I have probably 50,000 miles on that
Right.
in my own ownership. My Oldsmobile wagon went all over the place, Maine, Michigan, up and down the coast.
You just got rid? Is that the one you just?
That's
got
when
rid
I
of?
sold. I sold it about a year ago. My kids are getting a little older. I had multiple cars on the road, and I couldn't use it enough.
Right.
And I guess when we talked about one that got away, I'm a little sad that went, because like your dad's car, the thing was so comfortable to drive. It
Yeah.
was so easy. It wasn't fast. It wasn't, rowdy, which is really nice when you're doing like hundreds and hundreds of miles.
Right,
you
right.
know. So yeah, I've driven them a lot, and probably the dumbest thing I ever did. When I found the wood for that Oldsmobile, it was in Michigan, and I had this stupid idea that I would jump in my 40 Ford and drive to Michigan and pick up the wood for the Oldsmobile, which sounds like a great idea, except I did that over spring break,
Oh, no.
like March. It was still relatively cool, and like torrential downpour on the ride home, which was not a cool scene. But I did it for a number of different reasons, but it was something that, the fellow that I worked with to get the wood for the Oldsmobile, he was impressed, and it was fun. I would gladly do it again. So
That's awesome. So is there this is one of our wrap-up question, I would say, is a North Star item or thing or car, or it doesn't have to be whatever, and we could talk crazy, the prototype, Woody that never was, or is there anything that you would love to have, find?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's some more parts that I'd like to have better copies of. I should be very careful how I say this, because there's a Sportsman. There's a Ford Sportsman that a friend of mine owns.
Okay.
That it's not any better or worse than another Ford Sportsman, but because of who owned it before him, I'd really like to have it.
Oh, cool.
And so that, and I know you understand that with the early hot rods, because of who had it, that's why I'd like to have it.
Okay.
There's another Sportsman that's up in Maine. It's in a collection. The gentleman has 4 of them.
Wow.
Right? I'd love to have one of the 4 he has, because again, who owned it? Somebody I knew. So it kind of revolves around those cars. Other than that, I've been fortunate to have a lot of the parts and stuff I've wanted to have.
Found it, yeah.
Yeah, and like that, like I said before, the 37, the NOS wood that's just cool.
Right.
I'd love to find more stuff like that. I don't know that there's a lot of that out there.
Much of it,
Yeah.
Was the 32 on your list, like your wish list, or do you just kind of fall into that?
32 was not anywhere in the realm of possibility. A lot of things in my life I had no business being there, right?
Sounds familiar.
Right?
Yeah, you fall into stuff.
The 32, 2 good friends told me at Hershey that they were like, hey, our Hershey neighbor told us about this car. It's being restored by a shop teacher who passed. You're the guy that has to have this thing. And so, I did some selling and buying and trading and managed to make it happen. But it was more money than I've spent for anything.
Well, it's a 32.
Yeah, I mean, it was less money than my house, but
right. But for like a project car.
Oh yeah. I haven't even bought a late model that was as expensive as this thing was. Right.
Jeez.
But it is what it is, and the most important thing about it, especially for me, is that the restoration of the mechanicals is like, it's on point. It's done. It's really nice. And like personally, at this point in my life, I don't know that I have it in me to go to that length to
Understood.
restore a generator or do a motor, or like detail out the engine bay. Like, I just don't I don't
Well, it
want to
might
do
be
that.
if you tried to, it'd be the same scenario as him, where you may never get it done. You know,
That right.
and somebody
right.
bet younger benefits.
Right, and I would much rather like spend 7 hours sanding a piece of wood than to like clean a carburetor. Like,
Yeah,
I know.
get
Poor Steve in your shops,
I know.
like
Well, that's why
over there,
Steve-
like
yeah,
cleaning.
yeah.
I'm like, dude, don't do that.
Yeah. Well, that's why I hammer on the metal and do the other stuff, and he gets to do that. So,
Exactly.
yeah, that's definitely it. Is the as far probably one thing I wanted to ask for you because you're so close to it. You know, we hear it at Hershey and all different events with younger people. With Woodies, it's got to be possibly even more difficult. Do you see some younger guys or gals possibly getting into the Woody stuff, or is it even more challenging?
Okay, so this is I'm really glad you asked that question
Yeah.
because within the national club, that conversation's been pervasive.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's there's a school of thought that I don't subscribe to, and that is that, it's too expensive to own one of these cars, right? It's too much money.
We get it with the metal cars too. It's
Well,
like,
that's
yeah,
true.
Yeah.
And I don't buy that. Like, I don't buy that. When you look at what a late model costs today, you could buy a wagon.
Yeah.
The young people that I do see involved, they fall into two camps. They just, like me, fall in love with one of these cars, and they're like, I'm going to have this. Or in a lot of cases, the car was dad's or granddad's or uncle. Somebody had one like
Sentimental
it.
value too.
Yeah. I think that's where it is. But and just like kind of as a side story, and I had an older guy call me one day talking about my 40 wagon for some reason. This would have been like 5 years ago. And he says, yeah, I had one of those cars in the 70s, and man, I'll tell you, I got X amount of dollars for it. Isn't that a terrible, terrible thing? And I went, you got how much? And he told me the number, and I said, well, with that, respectfully, I don't have that much in the one I have now. Like,
Right.
I did it the right way. I went out and hunted down the parts, and I know you've talked about that a lot. Like, you don't necessarily have to open your pocketbook. You just got to hustle, and you got to find stuff, and you got to learn.
Put the time in.
And put the time in. And sometimes you get lucky, and sometimes you don't. And if you're persistent and you're patient, it really isn't any more difficult to have one of these than anything else.
Right.
So that's a long answer to your short question. I apologize.
No, I understand. But you are seeing some younger people, but it's interesting. I guess it's the same thing with any antique car. There is a large batch of people entering the hobby that are inheriting or didn't appreciate it as much until dad, grandpa passed away, whatever, and then, or, a family that was into it, and then they get all these cars. It's like, oh, now we need to.
Yeah,
I mean, that's what we get with the estates. It's like they are so overwhelmed with all, if your
All
kids
this
had to
stuff.
come in,
Oh, yeah.
they'd be overwhelmed, but like they end up narrowing in on the one key item,
Right.
And they keep that, and that's what gets them in the hobby and keeps it going. So
Exactly.
that's interesting. But they're not necessarily making a B pillar from scratch or something like
probably
that.
not.
So the craftsmen that are doing it are probably a little smaller. You're probably one of the younger.
Oh yeah, by far. In fact, of the 6 or so people that are doing this kind of work, I'm by far the youngest guy. And one guy that I know is still doing this kind of work, 77 or 78.
Wow.
How much longer can he do this, or does he want to do it? And I think that's a big thing for me is, as I'm doing this, my process is a little different in that a lot of times I'll develop a 3-dimensional model on the computer of the part, and I generate code and I machine it here, at least first operation. So I'm trying to, and I'm not putting it out in the world, but I'm trying to document how I do that so that if at some point I find somebody that wants to kind of step in,
Oh, cool.
they could kind of step in and take over.
Nice.
There will never be an incredible demand for this, but it's definitely something that I think will always be there.
Yeah. The cars they have substantial value, so there's going to be people wanting to restore them or
Right.
fix them or whatever.
Or whatever.
So that's definitely. But even that guy's a good example of what we call the IronTrap. It's like he's 70, mid or high 70s, still making Woody parts, still,
Yep. Yep.
So that's even though you might hand it over to somebody, you're still going to be hunting the swap meets or flea markets.
Oh yeah, forever. And that is a problem. That is a problem.
A problem.
I mean, you think about moving your warehouse to somewhere else. I know we've kind of talked about that at some point. That's going to be a task. Move a 6,000-pound machine.
Oh my God.
And there's 3 of them here. 4, 5. Because a lot.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's maybe the biggest thing is like, you have cars and parts. Well, then I have all this goofy equipment, and one of the pieces that Michael probably shows, that green machine. They haven't made one of those in 15 years.
Oh wow.
And the CNC, like the buy-in on this, I bought it right,
Mm-hmm.
but the buy-in on this is crazy to try to own one of these and not find one like I did.
Yeah.
It's a tall dollar number.
Right. I think everybody, even with the metal cars and stuff, and people are focused on metal cars, it's the same thing. Like a Pullmax, is it, unless you find one cheap or you dig and hunt and scratch, or a big English wheel or any of that stuff. So like, it's kind of the same, and it's big and it's heavy. And unless you know how to use them, they're worthless.
You shouldn't have it in your way, right?
Yeah.
So as a guy that had an English wheel that I built, and the reciprocating machine that I tried to build like 20 years ago, that was time I would have invested in learning how to use that. Was time that I wanted to invest in learning how to do this.
Ah, okay.
Right.
That's cool. Well, thank you, Jeff. I appreciate you having us here and letting us talk about Woodies. That's super interesting. And, again, for anybody who wants to get in touch with you, what's a couple ways they can?
Yeah, so East Coast Woodies on the web. And, of course, I'm on Instagram and all the other social media platforms as well. But same thing, East Coast Woody.
Awesome.
Is me.
Well,
cool.
If you guys have any Woody stuff, want to buy sportsman stuff, you can hit up Jeff.
Please.
That ad still stands.
That's right. And I will try to respond.
Yeah. Great.
Thanks.
Thanks, Jeff.